This is the Energy to Thrive podcast, episode number 002, with guest Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo. All links and resources you hear in this episode can be found by going to jenniferpowder.com/002.
Welcome to the Energy to Thrive podcast with weight loss and fitness expert Jennifer Powder. Join her each week as she delves into the world of health and what it really takes to create true transformation in your life, both physical and emotional. Through her messages and interviews with special guests, you'll be inspired to live healthier, happier, and hotter lives. Here's your host, a woman who's real, totally transparent, and gets to the heart of the matter, Jennifer Powder.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in today. I am super excited to share with you my next guest. Her name is Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo, and I met her a few years ago at a conference and just fell in love with her. You know, she's actually considered to be Shaquille O'Neal's head coach for happiness and is on a mission to free people from a restricted mindset and end the stress of perfectionism caused by your own inner critic. Now, if you don't know what an inner critic is, you're going to love this episode because it can actually play a pretty driving force in your life without you even knowing it. What's really cool is Elizabeth is America's most interviewed celebrity psychologist, so I feel very privileged that I got a chance to speak with her. She's done over 100 radio and TV appearances on shows like Dr. Oz, The Today Show, Steve Harvey, and you can find her publications in magazines like Success, Fast Company, Better Homes and Gardens, Huffington Post, and all sorts of other things. She is incredibly educated. She's a licensed practicing psychologist with a master's degree in physical therapy and a PhD in psychology. But what's really cool is Dr. Lombardo's newest best-selling book and upcoming course, Better Than Perfect, 7 Strategies to Crush Your Inner Critic and Create a Life You Love, helps anyone suffering from conditional self-worth or perfectionism turn down their critic's voice, turn up their optimal mindset, and gain essential skills to flourish in work, health, relationships, and life. So let's not delay, let's get started. Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so are you really considered Shaquille O'Neal's head coach for happiness?
Indeed. Who has a bigger smile than Shaq?
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And so, I remember, I'm just sort of taking a peek at your bio and, the fact that you're able to help, get people free from a restricted mindset and end the stress that's caused by the drive for perfectionism is huge. And it's something all of my listeners are going to want to know more about because in the work that I do in health and weight loss, the inner critic is such a huge part of what keeps women trapped in the cycle and yet we don't understand that often. We're often going to just the surface things like, well, eat this, don't eat that, work out like this, don't work out like that, and forget that it's really about the inner space.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So maybe just share a bit with us about sort of your journey through this and how you've become so passionate about really helping women understand the inner, well, not just women, everybody, but inner critic work and why perfectionism and the drive for that is so harmful.
So I'll start with how I came to be a psychologist first.
Good.
When I got out of college, I actually went to school for physical therapy. I was a practicing physical therapist for a couple of years. And I had a client who changed my life forever. I loved physical therapy. I loved helping people get out of pain and learn how to walk again after an accident. This gentleman, he just changed my life. His name was David. He had a surgical amputation from diabetes, which can sometimes happen. And he came down, they pushed him down in a wheelchair just like all my other clients. And he was just slumped over. And you could tell he just was not happy. I went up, I was trying to be all happy, I was really young, thinking, oh, he just needs to be happy, then he'll be fine. And he yelled at me, he's like, take me back to my room. So I took him back to his room, and later that day we had rounds with the doctors and the nurses, and we all decided that he was depressed. And it was the next statement that changed my life forever. The attending physician was kind of taking notes, and he haphazardly looked up and said, I'll prescribe him Prozac.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, you just cut his leg off.
Yeah.
Like, don't you think he needs to process this? And it literally was like the heavens opened up and they were like, woo, like this is your calling, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Because regardless of how good of a physical therapist I was, and I was pretty good, I could not help him because of his mindset. He was in this place where his life wasn't worth living. He was no longer a man. All this inner critic was preventing him from doing anything to help himself. And we couldn't get him up walking. We couldn't get him mobile again until he addressed this inner critic. And for some people, medication can be helpful. However, it seemed to me at that time what he really needed was to process through this. And we all, we all have an inner critic. Thankfully, we don't all have a loss of limb, but we all have an inner critic.
Exactly.
So everyone needs to hear that. It doesn't matter who you are, what you look like. I have clients who are well-known names who have inner critics. We all have an inner critic.
It doesn't matter if what race, what color, what profession, your socioeconomic status, your body shape, whether it's perfect body, overweight body. This is so true. You know what I'm going to ask is just keep your mic away from your necklace because it's just banging on there sometimes. And so we're going to get that feedback. That's okay. We'll just edit that part out, but we'll jump back in. And so this is it. An inner critic is actually it's like universal, right? We all live with them. And how I describe it is often it's just that super mean, bitchy voice inside your head that says horrible things to yourself. And you live with it every day. And so often you just think, well, that's the way I am, right? And so maybe let's go into why does the inner critic have such a need for perfectionism? And how does that really sabotage somebody's success in living a really happy life?
Yeah. So, when we talk about perfectionism, I think of perfectionism not just as a neat junk drawer, but it's that notion of an all or nothing mentality. Something is either perfect or it's a failure. Yeah. Okay, it's either right or it's wrong. I either go to the gym for an hour every day or I don't have time to do that, so I don't do any of it. I either have no cookies or I had one cookie, messed up my diet, I might as well have the whole plate.
Yes.
And so that all or nothing mentality that so many people really fall into. And then when you deviate, you're not the all, then you become the nothing. And a perfectionist not only thinks in all or nothing ways, it's either perfect or it's a failure, but she takes it one step further and she says, if it's a failure, then I'm a failure.
Yeah. And that starts the you suck, you can't do this, why even bother, you've done this, you've failed so many times before, what's the point? And so we often get these loops on like automatic playback, right? Like they're sort of on there going on all the time. How do you stop that?
All the time. And it's background music. So we're not even aware necessarily that we're saying this to ourselves, but we're so aware of the consequences because we feel lousy. And here's the thing. I wrote a book called Better Than Perfect on perfectionism. Just so you know, self-help authors write for themselves.
Yeah.
I was a crazy perfectionist, and I thought it was helping me be better. I thought that inner critic, I called the drill sergeant, was actually helping me be better. But really, it caused a lot of stress, a lot of tension within myself, and frankly, the people around me too.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, can you show your book? I know that if you're watching the video, you'll see this. If you're listening to the podcast.
It just happens to be right here. I will show you Better Than Perfect, 7 Strategies to Crush Your Inner Critic and Create a Life You Love.
So we'll put a link to that into the show notes, everybody, so just that you can grab it easily and access it. It's going to be one of the books I highly recommend that you pick up and read, especially if you're a woman listening to this right now who has been caught in any kind of yo-yo dieting cycle, or if you are sort of, if you've been stuck in the decades of dieting or lacking worth and thinking that your weight is defining you in some way, shape, or form, then it's almost, like Elizabeth was saying, it's almost like a workbook, right? Like you can start to go through it. Yeah.
Yep.
And so why, for my work, when so many people think, well, the diet, right? $100 billion industry now where so many quick fixes and fad things are promoted that prey on the insecurities of women. Why does no one, why are we so afraid to take it one step deeper? Why do we not understand yet that true change happens when we do our emotional work? Is that, because I think we're all fairly, my clients are all super smart, well-educated. Right. So what's the disconnect there?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with our desire for a quick fix.
Well, yeah.
Right? It's so much easier, and not that changing your diet is easy, but for some people, the notion of changing your diet, what you eat, is a lot easier than delving into this, and this can be scary. And, I have a lot of clients who say, I'm afraid to even go there because I'm afraid of what's going to happen. If I let myself go there, I'm going to cry and I won't stop for a week. However, I will say that's not always the case. And whether you want to address it or not, what's happening between your ears has an impact on every single interaction you have with yourself, with other people, with food, with your job, with your kids, with everything.
Yeah, it permeates everything. And I think women think that they can compartmentalize sometimes, right? Yeah. I'm going to struggle with my weight, my food over here, but the rest of my life is great. And really, that's not the case at all. There's stress, there's tension. I know that because I talk to my clients pretty intimately about what they're going through, and not yet has there been just one problem, right? It permeates the rest of their life. And so I guess the fear of sort of, and I was like that. I shared with you so long ago, like when I was in my stuff and using wine and chocolate to kind of push down these feelings I just didn't want to feel, that was easier until I hit a breaking point. And it takes a lot of courage. So how do you advise people to like basically not be ashamed of reaching out for help? Because so often it's like, I should be able to do this. I shouldn't need help with this.
We should all of ourselves do it, right? Yeah. And a lot of times, especially women, this is what my new book is on, we're people pleasers. We help other people. We're the caregivers, not the caretakers. I don't want to bother that person. That kind of mentality. My question is, why should you be able to do this? Yeah. To me, understanding how you want to think is a skill. It's like, I don't know, learning how to speak Russian.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people out there can speak Russian, but if you've never had a class on Russian speaking and you've never heard anyone speak Russian, why should you be able to speak Russian? It's ridiculous. And to me, like how you view the world, it's just another skill just like that. You haven't gotten the class on it yet. When you get the course and you apply those skills, you cannot help but be better.
Well, this is I use the same metaphor, but with like being a mechanic, right? Like, should I be able to take apart my car engine and put it back together? No, but I don't feel bad about that. I just go to my mechanic, right? And we're not taught this in high school or university. And I think and I hope that changes. I hope that changes.
Yeah.
And so really for the women who have been in this place, because often life ruts, they don't just happen in a month. Life ruts can sort of be this slow, insidious decline where the way I describe it is, for me, my priority list was like 100 things long and I wasn't even on it. And I didn't even know how to put myself back on it to even give myself permission to devote some time, energy, space, whatever, for my own self. So what do those women do?
Well, I think a lot of times it goes into that all or nothing mentality. I'm either selfish or selfless.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the opposite of selfish is selfless. I think that the opposite is taking time for yourself. You need to take time for yourself. You need to, take time to exercise, meditate, do fun things, have a hobby. Not all the time and leaving your kids starving, but some of the time is absolutely vital. And giving yourself permission to do that is going to be really important, not only for you, but if you're parents, if you're a mom out there, man, don't you want your kids to learn that it's okay to take care of your own self, your own needs, not at the expense of other people, but you also don't want to take care of other people's needs at the expense of yourself.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think I had at one point, I believed it was more valuable for me to wash a floor than to go out for a walk. And those are dark times. Those are hard places to be in, especially if a previous version of you wasn't like that. You just wonder, what the hell? Where'd I go? What's happened to me? Like, is this it? And that's scary.
Yes. I have my clients say, is this as good as it gets? Like, is this as good as my life gets? And the answer, no freaking way. The reason why you have the question in your mind is because you're ready to make that change.
Mm-hmm. So often there's sort of like a nudge, or there'll be like whether it's drama, trauma, life crisis, death in the family, diagnosis of a sickness, job change, or financial crisis. There'll usually be some sort of like big event, I find, that kind of pushes somebody over the edge to where it's like, that's it. Like, I'm not doing this. But along the way, there's been lots of whisperers, I call them, or messages like, whatever it is, circumstances, and we often get them, but then ignore them. So how do you start to wake up your own intuition again if you've been dumbing it down? Right? So we get, do you know what I'm saying? Like, we get the messages, but we ignore them until it's a 2x4 across the head.
I like to think of it as like, if you go shoe shopping, I like shoes, so I try to always think about shoes. But if you go to a store and you put on a pair of shoes, and it's the most beautiful pair of shoes you've ever seen, it's like the perfect height and color, and it's just, you just want to kiss it. It's so beautiful. You put it on your foot and you walk around, and it's too tight.
Yeah.
The smart thing to do, we don't always do this, but the smart thing to do would be to take that shoe off, put it back in the box, and go find another shoe. But a lot of times we'll wear it, and then we'll have the blisters, and then we'll have all kinds of issues, right? So to me, that's really what our intuition is. Our intuition is, unlike this external biofeedback, which is your foot saying that doesn't fit, our intuition is an internal biofeedback saying, this isn't working with the true you. Mm-hmm. This isn't consistent with who you really are and who you really are supposed to be. And so if you just start to listen to that, you don't necessarily have to change everything, quit your job and go to Africa and build wells or, whatever. But just start to listen to it and start to honor it just like you would if you put on a shoe that didn't fit, and start to say, well, what message am I getting?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like having more curiosity about your life again, Because I think so often there's these sets of rules that we've created, and they're almost default. They happen over time where it's like, well, I can't do that because, or I can't live life like that because, and then we have all of this justifiable list of, I've got kids, I'm a mom, I'm married, I've got a husband, I've got to work, I've got to volunteer, that it becomes at the cost of us, right? Who we really are. And so I think that that's such a good distinction, is to go, it's not all or none. You can still fulfill all of those rules and find a way to start becoming more true to you again. So perfectionism. So this is really interesting because people who I work with have often been chronic dieters, right? They've gone on more than 50 diets, whether it's the quick fix or just hoping that there's going to be one thing that speaks to them. And yet what happens is exactly what you said, all or none. They either follow the diet perfectly religiously for a week, and then if they have one thing wrong, then it's like, well, I throw in the towel, I obviously screwed up, and then they're off the diet for 1, 2, 3 months or whatever until they see a picture of themselves and they get back on. So what's a gentler way? Because I always say you can't lose weight in a bubble because you don't live life in a bubble. Like, life is still happening around us. And what do we do, right? How do we start to, if you've been in the all or none cycle, how do you bring it more to the middle? What are the tips that you give people that you work with to help us?
So the first one is, it's not failure, it's data. It's not failure, it's data. And by data, I mean information.
I love that.
Right? So if you look back at when you kind of relapsed or whatever you call it, look back to where you were on the diet and came off the diet. What happened? For a lot of my clients, it's the stress. Stress went up, and so they reached for that comfort food. Or they were crushed for time. They didn't have the food that they wanted. Or, I don't know, they haven't been getting any sleep, and so they're cranky and they want something to pick them up. So look for you. What were the variables? What were the ingredients that went into you no longer eating the way that you wanted to? And just learn from it. If it's stress, great. Let's get some new stress management tools for you. If it's you don't have the food with you, great. Let's talk about how you can bring the food with you, or what food you can get when you're out. If it's because you're cranky, let's talk about how you can get the sleep that you need.
Oh, sleep. Okay, can we talk about that for a sec?
Let's talk about sleep.
Because I think this is one of the things that is one of the most insidious ways women sabotage all the time. Maybe men too. Excuse me, I'm not sure, but as much. But what I know is when kids go to bed, or we come in from our day and all of a sudden it's now 8:30 or 8 or 9, and now we have me time, right? Yeah. Quiet time. And it feels like such a treat. But then we end up sitting in front of a television or Netflix binging, and it's midnight, and now we're going to go to bed, we're going to be tired, we're going to hit snooze, and we engage in this cycle. So in one way, we're getting this gift of me time, and yet it's not a gift at all. It's like toxic. What do you do?
Yeah, it definitely can be. And it really goes into when you're experiencing you time, how mindful are you? Because if we're watching 3-4 hours binge watching of Netflix, you're not being very mindful. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're a zombie.
Yeah, so, looking at ways, you time is absolutely vital. Looking at ways where you can really get the most out of it. So maybe it's one show and then, 30 minutes of reading, or taking a warm bath, or spending time with a loved one, or whatever it is for you, but things that you can do that are very mindful are going to really help you enjoy that more. It's kind of like eating. When I talk to my clients, there's something wrong with having a cookie if you eat it mindfully.
Right.
But what happens is we're like, I had a hard day, I deserve a cookie. Then the guilt, shame settles in, and we shovel it as much as we can because we already screwed up our diet. So the more mindful, the more present you can be as you're taking your you time, as you're eating, whatever it is, the more benefits you're going to get from it.
Oh, totally, totally. And so do you help, like, so a lot of people say that the best way to become more present is, constantly come back to your breath, right? You hear that with yogas, you hear that with meditation experts, you hear it with all sorts of people, that it's so easy to operate and be distracted all the time nowadays, whether you're on your phone or you're like, we get notices from everything, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, like we're constantly bombarded with stimuli, and it takes our attention so outward. How do you start to create that dedicated ability to regain focus? Because I think now we're living in a very scattered, like our ability to focus and maintain attention has become challenged.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, the obvious thing is just turn off your phone for a while. Nothing is going to, truly, you aren't going to miss anything. I have my clients and even, executives who are like, I can't do that. Yeah, you can. You really can.
So this is one of those rules, all or none, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I have to keep my phone on all the time because and so we start to live with these rules, and it's learning how to break them and see that we don't die, or we can still keep our business going, or whatever the fear is.
Exactly. Yeah, I had a client, I had someone the other day who wanted to get together, and I responded to an email, and the response back was, "Hey, I'm offline today. I'll get back to you as soon as I'm back online." And I thought, isn't that great? I can wait. I mean, it's not an emergency. There's an emergency number if I need it, but just being outward and upfront about it, good. I mean, we tell people how to treat us.
Right.
So start treating yourself nicer.
So with perfectionism then and overcoming it, like when we want to create the life that we want, and for many of the listeners right now, it'll be also a body that they want. Yeah. And one of the things that I say is, well, your body is just basically a vehicle that you get to experience your life with, right? Like we get one of them. And so where do people start to, I guess, direct their focus when it's a life that they want, but they can't even get past the 10 pounds that they feel is holding them back? I'll create the life I want once I fit into my skinny jeans, right? When I do this, yes.
Yep.
So I'll get to that when this thing is dealt with. So how do we, what do you do with that kind of thinking?
And we really actually have it opposite. So we think I'll be happy when I, lose the 10 pounds or when this happens. But the research overwhelmingly shows that when we address our brain, so when we get into that state of happiness, that was what my first book was on, of releasing the stress and the perfectionism. Once you do the internal work, the external stuff is so much easier.
Yeah. It's
so much easier because, why are you keeping on those 10 pounds? Well, stress has a huge role. Whether it's physiologically, because we know when we have chronic elevated stress, our body lays down fat, whether it's behaviorally, because, who reaches for a fresh garden salad when they're stressed out? So when you do the internal work, the external stuff is so much easier. The other thing that you and I were talking about, and you mentioned it just a couple of minutes ago, was this sense of worth.
Yes.
And when you determine your worth by how you look, that's a huge source of stress.
Yeah.
And so when I work with my clients, I talk about, instead of conditional self-worth, I'll feel good about myself if I lose the 10 pounds. What we really want is unconditional self-worth. I feel good about myself because of my values, because of my strength, because of who I am. And that doesn't mean, and then I'm going to go eat everything and it's fine. But when you have unconditional self-worth, you're actually more likely to eat healthy and helpful ways.
This, I think, is actually, this is hitting home so hard for me right now, because that unconditional versus conditional self-worth, part of what I knew is I was taking such not great care of myself that I felt embarrassed about it, I guess, like I felt like I'd really let myself go. And the minute that I started to actually put some better self-care practices into place, I felt better about what I was doing, which then sort of spiraled up, right? But I know that when people stay in the cycle of feeling awful about themselves, eating awful, not moving their body, and it just keeps going. And so at some point there has to be a willingness to overcome the resistance to change. Why are we so afraid to embark on change?
Because we're so afraid of failure.
Okay, talk about that, please.
There's this mindset of, if I try and fail, it's so much worse than if I don't try.
Yeah. Or if I failed before, right?
If I failed before, then obviously I'm going to fail again because I am a failure.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I see this all the time with health, with depression, people saying, I don't even want to try because I could not handle it if I tried and failed.
Yeah.
It's just easier to be in this place of victimhood.
Okay, and so victimhood, I like this too, because so often we'll be in that place. I was in that place, and I had no idea until literally a therapist pointed it out to me, and I was like, what? I'm not a victim. And then, oh, yeah, I was blaming, I was justifying, yes. I was rationalizing all of my behaviors, and in my own mind, they were all they were all understandable until somebody else came in and said, nah, man, like, no, you are a victim in this. Is that who you choose to be? And it felt like a slap across the face, to be honest.
Yes.
Right? Because I don't identify like that. But during stressful times, I was reverting to kind of that behavior. So can you talk about what victim behavior is, or the mindset of it? Because I think it's a word that maybe my clients are repelled by a little bit. Like they would never self-identify as a victim. They're strong, capable, driven, successful women. Victim, it doesn't go hand in hand. But yet it's all
and it feels
there.
Like you said, that slap across the face. It feels like a huge insult.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
So I'd like to take it there for a second, because I think when we are so successful, or our success has been predicated by how much we do, how many certifications, degrees, accomplishments, promotions, money is in our account, that we are very unwilling to hear that. And I actually think it's really helpful. So
So, in general, we are a very victim-driven society, right? We love hearing about people, celebrities who screw up. Oh, it makes us feel so much better.
If they can't do it, God, how can I, right?
Yeah. But, people love to watch these train wrecks on TV because it's that conditional self-worth. Well, then I feel better about myself if they're going to be. But when it comes to victimhood, it's really an epidemic in our society. And I see it a lot in relationships, especially significant relationships like marriages, where you're constantly blaming the other person for why you were unhappy. He doesn't appreciate me, or my kids don't do this, or society only likes thin people, and so I'm stuck. Yeah. And so whether you call it being a victim or not really doesn't matter. The opportunity is to say, if you stick a microphone in your brain, how many times would you hear yourself blaming your discontent, your health on someone or something else? And the goal is not to say shame on you. The goal is to say, okay, I can't control that McDonald's is out there, but I can control my reaction to it. And the real goal is to empower yourself.
I love that. And I think that's really helpful. I think that because I think that you can't change what you're not aware of. Right? Mm-hmm. So I could not change how I was being until somebody else helped me see it. And so once you become aware of it, then you've got a choice about what you do. Do you stay and continue operating like that? Or do you start to really take some personal responsibility for how you're thinking, responding, reacting? I think those can be two different things sometimes. And then move from that point. So do you, some of the work that I'll do sometimes will be to, imagine somebody that you admire or somebody that you hold in high esteem. What would they do? Because so often we feel ill-equipped to take the actions we know we need to take because we're scared. Right. So sort of embodying or imagining what that successful person over there does seems easier. Yes. So what is that? Why does that work sometimes for people?
When we're in this place of helplessness, which is really where we are when we feel like a victim, helplessness is one of the toughest emotions to deal with. It's the notion that there's nothing that I can do to change this. Yeah. And when we're in that place, it's hard to see any other options because we're so thick into it. It's kind of like instead of seeing everything, we start to see just the problem and that we're stuck. When we're talking about someone else, how someone else would react, then we're not as emotionally tied in. It's also like if you were if your best friend came to you with this problem, what would you say to her? Very unlikely would you be like, you know what, you really are a loser, a fat loser, go home. No way. You'd have great advice for her because you're a smart, intelligent, helpful person. But when it comes to ourselves, a lot of times we can't see that.
And so does that tap into the concept of really developing compassion and empathy for self? Like being able Was that a yes? Yes. Yes. Yeah. So instead of, and how do you do that? Because I actually found that I did some EQ assessment stuff on me when I was learning to become and I was like, I think I'm so empathetic. Like I really think, and I am, except when I'm stressed or conflicted. When I am stressed or conflicted, I shut down, close up, and I am resistant, and I am sort of like, like I don't care about anybody else. I'm going to stay safe right now because I am so afraid. I'm in terror. And I didn't realize that. And so part of what I had to work on was really how to bring that empathy and develop empathy and self-compassion. How do you help teach women learn how to do that, or people learn how to do that?
So there are two components. One is what you said about stress. So I like to think of stress is from 0 to 10, right? 0 is you just got off the massage table. Life is great. And 10 is the most stressed out you've ever been. When you are at a 7 or higher, you don't think rationally. I don't think rationally. We go into reptilian fight or flight brain, and we're just there to protect ourselves. So a question to ask yourself is, on a scale from 0 to 10, where is my stress level right now? And I always tell my clients, if it's at a 7 or higher, don't let anything out of your mouth and don't put anything in your mouth because that's the red zone. So the first thing is to do something to bring that stress level down. Then we can start to think more rationally. And then the second component is really, it goes back to this unconditional self-worth, because a lot of times we can be empathetic towards others, but we don't think that we deserve it.
Yeah.
And so, working through these steps to cultivate unconditional self-worth, then you can be empathetic toward yourself.
So it's kind of that, again, coming back to the breath, pause, breathe, do something to de-escalate within yourself. And probably, knowing that many women are in significant relationships, it's de-escalating the fight with the partner sometimes, or kids. And so often we want to teach in those heightened moments of like amygdala hijacking, right? And no one's able to receive it. And it's just like, wah, wah, wah. And it's kind of what we do inside our own head to our own self, right? The beating yourself up. You should have known better. You should have done this, could have done that. Then this would have been different. I shouldn't have ate that bag, or whatever. Well, so the minute that's like trauma drama is happening and somebody is able to stop and like take that breath, what's the next thing that they do? Like because you know how shaky you are sometimes after you've had that surge of hormones basically through your body, right? You've gone into fight or flight, whatever. What's next after that step? So
I'll just say one other thing. For some people, taking a deep breath works. For some people, that when you're so elevated, sometimes a deep breath doesn't do anything. My clients have been like, I knew I was supposed to take a deep breath, but I didn't want to because I was so mad. You know what I mean? Gratitude. Gratitude helps reduce the stress activity in our brain. But when you're at a 10 out of 10, you don't want to be grateful. You're angry or you're upset. So sometimes it's actually physiologically changing your state can be more helpful.
What does that look like then? What's an example of that?
Jumping on the bed, dancing, doing push-ups, doing jumping jacks, moving your arms up and down. Anything that you can do to move your body
and get out of your mind.
Get out of your mind. But there's also a physiological change that happens. I actually have one of those personalized rebounders, little trampolines in my office. And I'm in my home office right now. And my kids, especially with math homework, when they get really stressed out, they'll just come in and start jumping on the trampoline because their mind is not in a place where they can think, and they're starting to go into the inner critic. I can't do this. They jump on the trampoline and things change.
That's cool.
So buy a trampoline.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
This is so helpful. I think one of the things like with Energy to Thrive, the energy model is about exercise, nutrition, emotions, relationships, goals, and yourself, right? And I talk and teach and interview on those 6 core capacities. And I think that what you've shared is, inner critic and perfectionism, they're the two, often for many of us, they're driving the train, right? And the minute we become aware that's who is driving our life and can start to separate and take these suggestions and implement them. I've got one last question for you. Sometimes, again, you're smart, I'm smart, all the listeners are smart women. Why is it we can know better and not do better sometimes? That is probably one of the number one things. It's like, they can be so successful in a gazillion areas of their life, but feel like there's one area that they just can't get a handle on. And they know better, they'll say. I know better, but I'm just not doing better. What is wrong with me?
wrong with me? Yeah. And just that question in and of itself, I think is very diagnostic.
Right.
What's wrong with me? Right. Because we're pathologizing. We're saying, what's wrong? Something's bad.
Yeah.
To me, what comes up when you ask that question is this notion of perfectionism in terms of a perfectionist doesn't want to not be a perfectionist. So when I was a perfectionist, I thought that's why I had my graduate degrees and why I could do so much stuff. But really, there is some good of perfectionism, the strive for excellence, the wanting, to make things better. But there's also some not so good, which is that inner critic and the beating yourself up. We think that's what motivates us, but really there are lots of ways to be motivated. And so the whole concept of being better than perfect is striving for excellence and being empathetic to yourself and realizing that if you make a mistake, it doesn't make you a failure. It's just information.
Data.
And I think that it's just data. And so the more we can say, and I'm trying to get everyone to get into this notion of better than perfect. Like, you make a mistake, better than perfect. Couldn't go to the gym, but you did 10 push-ups. Better than perfect. You had one cookie and it was delicious. Better than perfect. And I think if we could kind of embrace this notion of any step in the right direction is awesome.
Oh, that is so good. Okay, so let's get to the bare bones of how people can find you, because anybody listening is going to love you and is going to want to know more. So I know we can go to your website, where is it right here? ElizabethLombardo.com. So again, that'll be in show notes. And maybe just do a quick shout out about your book, because if you're a woman listening to this podcast right now or watching the video, hold it up again just for a second. So Better Than Perfect, you can grab it probably at any major and probably all over the place, really, right? You can order it.
Yeah, mostly online now.
Online now. Perfect. Yep. And then I know you've got a quiz too that's really helpful. Explain a bit about that.
Yeah. So, a lot of times people may say, I'm a perfectionist, but it's not a big deal, or I'm not a perfectionist at all. When the book came out, I actually did a segment on today's show, and we had 6 producers take the quiz at betterthanperfectquiz.com. And all of them denied being a perfectionist, but they scored ridiculously high. So whether you call yourself a perfectionist or not, it doesn't matter. Oh. It's fun because perfectionism, again, is the way that I define it. It's so much more like, I don't have a neat junk drawer. My closet is not color coordinated. And yet I suffered from perfectionism for so long. And
perfectionism in denial. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I'm fine. It's fine.
I don't have a problem.
So when you can realize how perfectionism plays a role in your life, then the whole notion is not to get rid of all the perfectionism. It's to get rid of the stuff that isn't working and to be better than perfect.
Oh, that is so great. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Energy to Thrive. You are amazing. I love watching your segments. For those of you listening, you can all follow Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo on Facebook. You can search her and find her there. And then you'll also see all of the clips that she puts up of her Good Morning America show. And you're on so many different things. They're all there. And I always love watching them. And if you've tuned in for today's episode, thank you so much. Please like it and share it. I truly believe that this is something more and more people need to understand. It's that there isn't anything wrong with you. Most of us are living with parts of ourselves that we don't even understand or have an idea about how to change. And change is so possible. So head on over to iTunes, rate it, share it, like it, spread some love so that more women and men can get this message. And we'll be back again next week with another amazing episode for you on the Energy to Thrive podcast. Dr. Lombardo, Elizabeth, thank you again so much.
Thank you so much.